Alright, how's it going everyone, and welcome to another video. Now, in this video, I finally want to talk about the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus and just the general, the general category of retro gaming handhelds. This is probably one of the most fascinating gaming device categories that I've seen in the past couple of years. This area has completely blossomed, this type of device mainly, and right now there's no true market leader currently. There's so many different players in this space, right? You got Ambernick, Retroid, Powkitty, Odin, and even Valve, right? All these different players trying to make a retro gaming handheld, and it's gotten a lot of innovation and progress over the past couple of years. So in this video, I just want to talk to you guys about my experience using a retro gaming handheld and whether or not, it's worth it, because recently with iOS introducing and allowing game emulators like Delta and PPSSPP, I want to do some comparison and just figure out if a retro gaming handheld still makes sense in 2024 versus, just emulating it on your phone, or perhaps, actually getting a native device like this and playing your games through here, through like an actual, the native hardware. So let's get into it. So first, let's talk about the form factor and the plethora of options you got, right? First of all, the size of these devices are really compact. The only exception from what I can remember are mainly the x86 handhelds like the Steam Deck and ROG Ally, but for everything else, mainly like any non-x86 handheld, these things are incredibly compact. It's almost like carrying a second phone in your pocket, which for the grand scheme of things is not really that big of a deal. And not only is it compact, but you got a plethora of options to choose from. I mean, all the different players of this market have different shapes and sizes of what kind of handheld you can purchase. Like, for example, Ambernick has a very Game Boy-esque retro handheld that makes it feel really, really close to playing on an actual Game Boy, right? Meanwhile, you got stuff like Retroid here who are making the pockets, the series of pockets, which are basically like Switch Lights, kind of Switch Lite, very traditional, almost like a PSP kind of deal as well. It's overall very, very wide and vast on what kind of device you can get, and there's no one size fits all option, and that's both a blessing and a curse. I think personally it's more of a blessing because you have the freedom to choose which one you prefer and how you prefer to play your old games. And I think that's great in this market where really it's all up to preference mainly. Like, so many different people will be wanting to play different types of games in the past, so being able to choose from there is awesome. And another great thing about these devices is their price points. With the exception of the Steam Deck and those x86 handhelds, you can cop one of these devices for basically $200 or less, which is very, very budget friendly, and a lot of people can afford to purchase one of these. And if you're someone who just wants to play like lighter titles, like Game Boy titles, or maybe pre like GameCube era or PS2 era games, you can cop a device that is just powerful enough to play those older games for under 100. And at those prices, honestly, I would say absolutely it's worth the purchase if you're even considering getting one of these. At that price point, these things are very affordable and very easy to recommend for those specific types. But we can talk about price and form factor aside, but nothing is more important of any tech device than the experience. And for the most part, using a retro gaming handheld gives you a unique experience that honestly cannot be replicated on just like emulating it on your phone or something like that. So let me explain. First of all, it's a separate device, so you don't have to rely on your phone for battery and all that stuff. So you can have your phone separately for battery and have that on the side, and it saves space for your phone, right? Another thing is that for the most part, these things have physical controls, right? You have actual buttons like a D-pad, an actual gamepad for the most part. Whereas with a phone, you either have to rely on touch controls or you have to purchase a little controller here, like for example, the Backbone, which in my personal opinion, this does not feel as portable as carrying this in your pocket, which I find kind of surprising. But yeah, I mean, you don't have to pay separately for accessories just to play your gaming handheld or whatever, playing your retro games basically. And finally, really the biggest thing for me about the experience of using this device is the custom built firmware and operating systems that these devices come with. So for example, even though this Retroid is basically just running Android, on top of it, they have custom firmware, like for example here with the Retro Launcher, to easily install different emulators and get your ROMs or whatever onto the system to play all of your old games in here, and it does it in a very clean and nice aesthetic. Emulators aside, it's a really nice way to just organize and keep everything in check. And if you're someone who really likes these kind of user interfaces, then you're going to absolutely love these devices. So just to show you guys, right, I can just quickly go into like some PSP emulation and just, pop in a game and play. And with emulation, you have some nice quality of life feature stuff like, let me go ahead and swipe here, like save and load states. You can go ahead and just open up something right there and boom, you're into a game and you don't have to wait. There's some really nice quality of life updates compared to like maybe playing on native hardware that you get from using an emulator. And people are going to be saying, oh, you're not going to get the full experience of using an emulator versus natively playing on the device. And while that's true in some sense, most people are not going to care. They just want to find a way to play these games. So for them to just play them wherever is a nice thing. And people are not going to care about the authentic experience for the most part. So as we're playing through this, you can see here, this is a PSP game. And for the most part, I'm really, really enjoying this. This basically almost feels like a PSP. The only real gripe I have with specifically experience on emulation is the 3DS and DS emulation experience, because when you have a one screen, basically you have to divide those two screens because obviously DS and 3DSs have multiple screens. So in my opinion, it's not really that ideal. I just don't enjoy playing DS and 3DS games on these types of devices. And unfortunately, there are not a lot of emulators that, or retro gaming handhelds that have dual screens. And when they do, they're quite pricey. So honestly speaking, really when it comes to DS and 3DS emulation, I would rather just play them natively on the system and just homebrew my system to get some 3DS software on there. But for everything else though, this is completely playable. And with PlayStation 2 and GameCube, where those devices or those consoles are home consoles, being able to play your GameCube or PlayStation 2 games on the go is pretty damn nice. Honestly, I've said a lot of good things and I don't really have that many bad. I mean, given for what you're paying for, these things do what they need to do or what they're designed to do very well. And I think really the only problem is potential redundancy, because depending on the type of gamer, I still think that simply emulating games on your phone is a completely fine experience for specific type of retro gamers. If you're someone who just wants to play like one or two games, like you're someone who just wants to play Pokemon as an example, and you're fine with playing on touch controls for the most part, then yeah, I mean, this device, even though it is relatively affordable, it's going to be a redundant purchase, and you might as well just, emulate and play Pokemon on your phone or whatever. And that's completely fine. That's completely valid. You don't need to purchase this device to do that. But if you're someone who wants a separate handheld to play games on, right? And you want to feel like you actually are playing on an handheld, like an actual portable gaming handheld, then honestly, it's hard to beat these retro handhelds, especially with how expensive buying old native hardware is nowadays. Like these things like 3DSs and PS Vitas can go as high as $200+ nowadays. Buying these things isn't the worst thing in the world, because not only are you going to be able to play these types of games from those devices, but you have a plethora of other devices to play, right? You have platforms specifically, right? You're not just restricted to, like, for example, PlayStation 2 or 3DS. You have a whole library, like I have here, of platforms that you can play your games on. And, it's really nice having a separate dedicated handheld to play all of those retro games on. So overall, personally, from my experience using this handheld for the past year, there's a lot to love about owning a retro handheld. And, the industry is still evolving, right? With OLED screens, bigger batteries, more powerful processors to potentially even run PS3 and Xbox 360 emulation. When that comes into fray, I'm absolutely considering purchasing one, because PS3 and Xbox 360 emulation is a type of emulation that can only be done on the x86 handhelds, and those are pretty pricey and a little beefy. So if we can get like PS3 emulation on devices this compact, then that would be my dream. Overall, if you're someone who just misses playing the older games and wants a nice, affordable way to play them and bring them on the go, really, because these are handhelds, then honestly, like, you can't go wrong with any of these devices. The retro gaming market or retro emulator handheld market is booming, and honestly, like, they're easy recommendations for the most part, as long as you pick the right one. Obviously, you gotta do your research and with how many options there are, but I think still, regardless of which option you choose, you cannot go wrong. These devices are very, very awesome. So yeah, I just wanted to just talk about this device because I've always showcased the Retroid Pocket 3, and I've never really done a video on just the retro gaming handhelds in general. So I just want to talk about it in this video and just talk about my experience. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one later.